Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this video, I'm going to be looking at the new moon in Leo on the 28th of July at 17:56 UTC. So you can work out what time it occurs where you are in the world from that central point. Now, this new moon, like all new moons, is about new chapters always. And you know, throughout the year, we get an opportunity to open a new chapter in every house in our chart, whether that's your natal chart, you know where Leo, for instance, fits in your natal chart, or whether we're looking at the general pattern, the solar picture. We have those 12 houses of the solar chart in which a new moon occurs. So we get to have new chapters and new beginnings. And of course, I'll be talking about that when we get a little bit further along in this particular video. But certainly, I would say in the sign of Leo, wherever Leo is in your chart, then this is a supremely creative area of the horoscope, because Leo, this fiery, creative energy, is available to you through the planets in that particular house and through that house and what it means, that area of life in particular. What is significant about this new moon is that it is connecting to planet Jupiter. Jupiter currently in the sign of Aries. But it's the only real aspect that the moon is making, or the new moon is making. And that makes it rather interesting. There's often, you know, an all or nothing quality about a planet, or in this case, a new moon, that doesn't really make connections with anything else in the chart, because it's almost like it's all or nothing. I wouldn't say that exactly with this new moon. I wouldn't say it's supersized and super effective simply because it's not integrated with the rest of the planets. But I would say that its connection to Jupiter is significant, and I'm going to explain why in a minute. In fact, on the day that the new moon occurs, on the 28th of July, Jupiter will be stationary retrograde. And when planets are stationary, they're uber effective. Their properties are much, much bigger and more obvious and profound than they are at other times. And what we get with Jupiter, of course, is on the plus side, we get growth and joy. Jupiter is the planet of abundance, but we pick up the negative side of Jupiter when we get inflation and we get things that get out of control. And we have to bear all of that in mind. On this occasion, this new moon is trining Jupiter. In other words, it's 120 degrees away, or roughly, and that's an angle of harmony. But I have to say, in my long years of experience as an astrologer, really the trines and the sextiles, nice as they are, give a lot of muzak into the chart and a lot of background niceness. But if you really want an effect, then you've got to go for the hard aspects. You've got to look for conjunctions, squares, oppositions, and also the quincunx or the inconjunct. That tends to bring out a much more, much more obvious connection between the planets that are angled in that particular way. So a little bit of a word about Leo as well. The sun comes into the sign of Leo on the 22nd of July. And in fact, it comes in at 28 minutes past 8 UTC. And you can figure that out again wherever you are in the world. But I mention that because if babies are born before that time, when the sun moves into the next sign, before that time, they're Cancerians. And after that time, they're Leos. And you may say, well, how does that work? Surely, how can a split second make a difference between somebody being a Cancerian or being a Leo? Well, I'm afraid that is just the way it is. There has to be a cutoff point. And until, 29, 59, 59 minutes of Cancer, yes, you're a Cancerian. And when you're 0 degrees, 0 minutes, 0 seconds into Leo, wow, you're a Leo. And we can look at that. We need those demarcation points. And whether you're looking at this in the sense of the planets being more symbolic than having an effect. Well, we still need to take that symbol and go with it. It's Leo, not Cancer. And really, if we look at the idea that the planets do exert some kind of force on us, some kind of energy that we can pick up, then at 59, 29, 59, 59, then there's this Cancerian focus to the sun's energy, as opposed to a second later when it becomes a Leo focus. And, if you think of the sun sign as your brand, and I have talked about this before, the idea that when the sun is in a sign and then you become that sign, you are that was where the sun was when you were born. It is your brand. It's like your nationality. You share the features of that sign with hundreds and thousands and millions of other people, but you will all have that same branding. There is a familiar kind of note and set of themes that goes with that grouping, just as we find that in a nation having characteristics and certain traits. That's the same thing. So it's an easy way to look at the sun and not get into too much conflict about, why it is one thing 1 minute and then another. What does it mean anyway, especially when you've got a whole lot of other planets in different signs. The important thing is to remember that the sun in the sign it's in is your brand. Okay, like being, member of a nation. So let's have a little look now at the chart itself. So as you can see, as we look at this, the sun and the moon are to be found just over the horizon. I've set this particular new moon for Warsaw. And one of the reasons I've set it for Warsaw is that I have so many lovely Polish clients and followers. And I thought we might see where things are from the perspective of Warsaw on that particular evening. So the sun will be not quite setting. It'll still be, we can still see the sun. It'll probably be that kind of nice low on the horizon sun where its rays are kind of muted, rather beautiful. So it's something to think about, because that, as I said before, is about opening a new chapter. And here we can see, if we look at the numbers, we can see 5 degrees of Leo, 39 minutes, 38, 39 minutes. And we can see that that's quite near Jupiter, which is at 8 degrees, 33 minutes of Aries, 43 minutes of Aries. So we have that trine aspect in play. But there are some more important things about this particular picture, this horoscope, that on the day that we get the new moon and Jupiter is turning stationary retrograde, then Mercury is also squaring Uranus. And we can see that quite clearly. If we look at Mercury just above the moon at 18 degrees of Leo, we can see if we go right down to the kind of 5, 6 o'clock position of the planet Uranus, we can see that that too is at 18 degrees of Taurus. So we can see there's a Mercury-Uranus square. So this adds a quality to our new moon in the sense that it is not just a new moon that brings perhaps joy and growth, inflation and things out of control, but it also has an element of surprise to it, something unusual. And I often think about Uranus, we're thinking about kind of electric energy. And of course, Uranus has a lot to do with technology, has a lot to do with software and systems that we all use, whether we're turning on our washing machine, on our laptops, or trying to catch a train or a boat. Everything is software and, of course, the internet as well. So we might expect on that new moon day that either this is a day when a new piece of software is launched, or we get an upgrade or an update to our technology, or it may be a day when there is a lot of interference, a lot of static. And so we get problems with technology, we get problems with our communication systems, because Mercury is all about communication systems. And of course, what else is Mercury but travel? And travel has been a nightmare for a great many countries, really, since, well, the time since May, really, and it is getting worse with more flight cancellations. We've got strikes, and even if your country isn't on strike in a transport or travel area, it can have an effect on you if you're trying to get there, or you're waiting for planes and trains and boats to come from another place. So this is going to be a particularly difficult time for communications and travel. And I have to say that I think that's going to be a general theme for the next couple of weeks. In fact, you might like to think of this new moon as the kickoff to a period of great volatility and instability. Also, of course, innovation and breakthroughs. I encourage us all to look always at the positive and negative attributes to any planet or point or aspect or transit. You're always going to get some positive factors and you're going to get negative factors. So this is something to bear in mind as you look around this period of time, whether you're looking out at global developments or whether you're looking at your own personal life. And of course, if you know where these particular influences land in your natal chart, you can see that they're going to have a particularly powerful effect on you. Well, of course, what is important, as you'll probably see, that Mercury in this chart is at the opposite point in the zodiac to Saturn. We can see Saturn there in the sort of 8 o'clock position at 23 of Aquarius in 8 minutes, retrograde. And we can see Mercury at 18 of Leo, so it hasn't got very far to go before it opposes Saturn. In fact, this is another reason why this period of the year is very volatile and quite challenging, because we've got Saturn and Uranus back in their, much more closely in their dynamic, their 90-degree dynamic, which means that we veer from, liberation and things that take us forward to having to go back to square one and having a lot of our freedoms interfered with. Remember, that was all the way through 2021, and how many times lockdowns forced us back indoors or whatever, stopped us having, the things that we like, going out and about, parties, weddings, theatre, sporting events. So we got a little bit of a flavour of this coming back. But of course, in terms of our lives, it can be very frustrating because we can't make plans and we can't get our plans off the ground because something is happening. So we'll see this particularly in play as we see that Mercury opposing Saturn at that point. But there is a lot more to the story. If you look at Saturn, and we can see it's 23 degrees of Aquarius, if you look above Saturn, you'll see there is Pluto at 27 of Capricorn. And if you go down from Saturn, you'll see Neptune at 25 degrees of Pisces. So by the time Mercury gets to the opposition to Saturn, we've got a very, very important configuration in play. We've got what is called a yod, or a finger of fate. And that is a really, really important configuration. If you have a yod in your chart, and of course it will be with different planets or what, the main theme of this is the idea that you have to struggle long and hard to, achieve what you're hoping to achieve. But once you get there, the good fortune of that yod will kick into place. And so it starts being a very fortunate factor. And we can translate it really to the times we are living in, and seeing that Mercury, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune configuration as the idea that we may be struggling at this point in the year. And it may be a superhuman effort to get things to work in the way we want them to work. But hey, you know what? Out of that is going, it's going to come good things. We will go forward. Again, using our time in COVID as an example, how much we invented and how much we came to understand of our priorities during that period. Well, it's the same really with this yod configuration. We might be stymied and stifled in some way, but my goodness, what we pull out in the way of innovation is going to be something that we're going to be grateful for in the future. And I would say, interestingly enough, with this particular configuration, if we looked at maybe what that would mean in a natal chart, we might find that a person who has Mercury and forming a kind of yod configuration here would be both visionary, seeing great possibilities, and maybe quite artistic and imaginative and inventive because of the connection to Neptune. When we look at the connection to Pluto, that's also about digging very deep into the darkness to come up with solutions, in this case with Mercury, creative ideas. So we might find there's a little bit of a conflict there between the idea of research and the depth of what we're trying to think and conceptualize, having a problem or an argument really with Neptune, who's much more instinctive and spontaneous, if you like. And so we might find somebody who has an awkwardness with communication, but in the spirit of the struggle to begin with, eventually leading or yielding to great good fortune, all it takes is time. So one other thing I want to look at too, you can see Mars here in this, in the horoscope, again at that kind of 6-7 o'clock position. At the time of the new moon, it's about 15 degrees, a little bit more, of Taurus. So you could see that it's edging towards the Uranus at 18 degrees. And in fact, it will get there on the 1st of August. And of course, as soon as it's hit Uranus, or as it's on its way, it's going to square Saturn. And you know, we'll have a precursor of that. Come back to me now. You know, Mercury, the Mercury opposition and, you know, configuration to that Saturn-Uranus dynamic is going to be interesting. And I've talked about communications and travel in that regard. Well, when Mars comes along, Mars really is the principle of a kind of, you know, action and drive. It's a force, really, Mars, and we think of it as the warrior of the planets, and we associate a lot of the idea of war and of conflict from Mars. And if we put that word conflict and, you know, together with Mars and Uranus, we put it together with revelations and revolutions, we can see how tricky this period is going to be, both in terms of the revelations, whether these again are to do with situations out there in the world or with our own, you know, nation, politicians and the rest, or whether for us too, we are being awakened to something in our personal lives. And that's quite a difficult awakening in the sense that it carries a cost, or it's going to involve quite a lot of effort because of what it is. So the other thing I kind of wanted to mention, and I should have mentioned really, about Jupiter and Aries, which I think is very interesting, is that Aries, being ruled by Mars, is a sign that we associate again with action and war and ambition and striving and all of that kind of thing. It is interesting with Jupiter in this sign, we've seen a kind of expansion of military forces all over the world. And that's very much a reflection of Jupiter and Aries. And now we're coming back to the idea that Mars is coming up to connect with Uranus and square Saturn. You know, we've got really this great feeling that things are going to be really kicking off big time when it comes to conflicts of one sort or another. And what I also found interesting about this period of time, and remember, I'm looking at it from the 2 weeks from the new moon in Leo, really effectively, to the full moon in Aquarius, which is in the middle of August. some of you may remember that the head of intelligence or military intelligence in Ukraine was talking on camera, and this was several months ago. And he said that the middle of August would be the turning point in the war in Ukraine. And by association, he was suggesting that it would turn in the favor of Ukraine. Well, that's going to be very interesting to see, because, of course, we're 6 months down the line from the start of the invasion of Ukraine, and a lot of these kind of planetary aspects are now connecting by opposition or square or conjunction to where they were back in the February period. So I do think that this period of these 2 weeks is going to be very, very significant for the whole of the development in the Ukraine situation. So I think what I'm going to do now is move on to what this new moon means, sign by sign. And we're going to start with Leo, because obviously it's your birthday and it's your birthday time, and a new moon always opens a new chapter, but it's a new personal chapter. And I think, you know, when we align this to the first house, let's say you've got Leo rising, so you've got the new moon in your first house. You know, the first house is all about your appearance, your manner, how you greet the world. So the idea of a new moon in Leo is really about how you look and how you deliver yourself, really, when we're out and about. And that might mean all sorts of changes to your image, or you know, appearance as well as image. Image can mean something slightly different. I mean, we all have a, well, we don't all, but some of us have a professional image, and it's about us anyway. And so a new moon says there's a new development, and hopefully we like to make conscious our astrology. We like to get behind it. So the idea here is that we think about different ways to present ourselves and different ways to sort of maximize who we are. And of course, the new moon can bring opportunities. So opportunities to do things where your personal appearance counts, or you personally matter. And it's your personal ambitions, your personal drives that we're looking at with this new moon. And of course, if you've got a first house new moon, Leo rising, or you are a Leo, you're already a very creative, a sort of force of nature, someone who really likes to be very much behind their own activities and their own progress, and full of the sun, if you like, your natural ruler. So this new moon, especially in its connection to Jupiter, does suggest some kind of new opportunity that's very good for you, or some kind of experience that makes you feel really, really great. And how often does that happen? So if we look at the opposite side, if we look to Aquarius, then the new moon is in the 7th house, and we're in the area of relationships. So a new moon, new beginnings, new chapters opening can mean, yes, a new phase for a relationship, whether that's a working relationship, it's your relationship with a company or an organization, or it's a romantic relationship. It's a relationship like marriage. So there's a new stage, a new chapter opening, and that can open for all sorts of reasons. You know, it can be that something happens to a partner. Maybe something happens job-wise to a partner, or something in some other regard, and that does mean there's a change in the dynamics of your relationship. But it can mean a new chapter opening, literally, with a new person. So if you are an Aquarian and this new moon is falling in your 7th house, as it will do if you're an Aquarian, or if you know your horoscope, you've got Aquarius rising, the new moon is in the 7th house, then this suggests that a new partnership is ready to come in. So if you have been sort of seeking perhaps to have a partner in life, or at least someone to kick around with for a while, then that's your signal to get out there. Because how often does love come and find you? Well, it does, but it's not going to find you in your sitting room or under the duvet. You want to make a little bit of an effort. So this is a good signal. And, you know, a lot of us don't form new relationships easily, often because we've been hurt. And, you know, we're cautious about committing ourselves. You know, we don't want to do that again. But we have to get over that. Every relationship is different. And with a new moon in the relationship house, it says, look, you know, this is time for a new order to come in. And, you know, blast, you know, throw those memories into the memory box of the past. Don't dig them out and let them prevent you from forming new relationships. Go into it with a good heart. And of course, I have to say that companies and individuals may come to you with offers now. And I'm not saying you should take every offer that comes your way, but it's certainly worth considering, especially with that link to Jupiter. Probably going to be a good opportunity for you. If we come to Taurus, and this new moon is taking place at the very base of your chart in the 4th house. So we've got Taurus rising, new moon in the 4th house. So this is a new moon starting at root level. And it's a very good time to think of this new moon about, you know, how we, you know, let me use a garden as an analogy. If you plant your plants in good soil and the roots can get a really good grip, and then we water those roots, then the plant will thrive. So when we look at 4th house matters, that's where we're at. We're looking at how our life grows from strength to strength. And it's how we nourish it. It's how we put the foundations in. They need to be firm. They need to be in the right kind of, on the right kind of, you know, foundation. That way we go from strength to strength. That is certainly something to think of around the time of the new moon. If you're starting a new enterprise, you're moving house, you're doing something, and you can see very clearly it's a new chapter, then the thing that you must focus on is how well that is established. You know, it can't be a shortcut. It has to be deep. And of course, the new moon in this area can indicate new developments within the family. So, you know, people coming into it by marriage or babies being born, and new chapters opening in that way. New homes to move to, new locations, new attributes to the home, new furniture, new paint, a conservatory. It's endless, but the idea that we're thinking about the newness of things, the chapter opening at root level, means that the things we do and the things that happen really do go through or span through the whole of our lives. Now, if we come to Scorpio, then the new moon is in the 10th house, and the 10th house is right out there in the world. It's where we meet, you know, the world in a bigger sense. So it's our job, it's what we do, it's our role. And while we can have a role as a dentist or an astrologer, we can have a role as a parent or a spouse. I mean, we have many, many roles. So the idea is that the new moon is bringing in a new dimension to our role in life. Our career may be, however it plays out in your individual life. If you have, you know, Scorpio rising, so the new moon is falling in the 10th house, or whether you only know you're a Scorpio, then the 10th house is where this new moon is focused. And believe you me, a solar chart works really, really well. Over the years of doing so much solar astrology, I know how effective it is. So, you know, you can, you know, think of it in two ways, if you like, on this occasion. And I think too, the 4th and 10th houses have a lot to do with our parents, you know, where we've come from. And often, of course, what we do in life, what we take on as a career or as a role, is reflective of the guidance that we've had from our parents and the experience we've had in our early life. So that new moon can have something to do with your parents as well. And, you know, whether there's something new happening in their life, or there's something that you have to do in connection with them. Perhaps if you've got elderly parents, this is a time where a new order is coming in, and you definitely become the parent to your parents. And maybe arrangements have to be made as to how to either bring them into the fold. Remember, this 4th, 10th axis is an axis. It brings in the attributes of the 4th and the 10th house when you've got a full moon on this particular axis. So it's worth thinking of all these things. But it can also be a new job or a new opportunity or an expansion, something new in your existing career. If we move on now to the mutable signs, and we think about where this new moon is falling, on this occasion they're falling in all the seeking houses, that I call it, 3rd, 9th, 12th, and 6th. This is where we seek something. So a new moon has a lot to do with experience and searching for what we're looking for, whether that's information, whether it's spiritual expansion, knowledge, or whether it's experiencing a wider kind of sphere of influence, if you like. And that's particularly so with Sagittarius, because this new moon is in the 9th house, and the 9th house is where we expand our boundaries. It's where we go further than we've gone before, and we can do that in travel. We can go to different places in the world, or we can do that in the sense of discovery, what our experience teaches us and what we actively seek to learn. So the new moon offers you a new opportunity here. Maybe you already know you're going to be going on quite a long journey, and you know that new moon symbolizes that. On the other hand, it may be that you've been thinking about, you know what, I need to expand my skills. I need to look into this area because I need more knowledge about it. Or maybe for a lot of people, this is a very important period for results coming in. You know, in England, we have A-level results in August, and we have GCSE and GCEs, the results coming out in August. So for many Sagittarians, this is appropriate. Then what's going to happen is that the results are going to open an absolutely new chapter of life for you. And that, I would say, is an extremely positive concept, especially linked up to Jupiter, which is your ruling planet. If we come to Gemini, then the new moon is in the 3rd house. So it's a little bit more localized. You know, I often say to you that I think if the houses were characters and jobs, then you'd be a journalist in the 3rd house and a novelist in the 9th house. So the novelist looks at a much bigger, more kind of imaginative kind of landscape. And in the 3rd house, you're looking at much more factual, local, near at hand kind of things. So this new moon here could indicate some important developments, new things happening in your neighborhood. And that could be anything from, having new buildings being built, to roadworks and changing the way that you have to get around your neighborhood. But it can also be that there are new neighbors, in which case, getting to know your new neighbors might be something you actively do if you know that new moon falls in the 3rd house, or you are a Sun Gemini. And the same thing really with learning. So a lot of the things I just said to Sagittarius, this idea that results are coming through in August, and that might really apply to you as well. And I think here there's a lot of considerations to be made for, especially if we think about that point where you're, whatever you get in the sense of results will take you to university, the university of your choice, or it won't. There's a lot to be said for this new moon giving you an opportunity to retake something, to go back and reconsider where your energies and your intellect and, those things are best channeled. And there could be new opportunities and new routes for your, intellect and your intellectual pursuits. That might be, again, something really to consider if you're a Gemini. If we come to Pisces, here we are in the 6th house. And so often in my work, I come across people who think the 6th house is of little significance. And if you've got planets in the sixth house, I do, I've got 3 planets in the sixth house, including my son. And the thing about the sixth house is where we do the work of life, as I always say. And yes, it is work sometimes, but it's not necessarily a career. It's the work that we do in the context of our career. So it's our attitude to work. It's our work ethic. And it's more than that in the sixth house. It's about, well, it's a holistic house, really. So it's how the balance of everything works together to give you a life that sings with purpose. We find our purpose in the sixth house. And often that purpose is linked to doing things that are good for people, just as much as we think about the sixth house in relation to health. We need to do what's good for us. And with a new moon in this area, it says, hey, we need some new thinking, both in the area of work and how we work and how we do the work of life, how we go about being healthy, being fit. Then a new regime is welcome and something we should get behind. And of course, sometimes there are kind of new developments which really help us in our work. So we could be thinking of new devices and new situations that help us to work better. Or we could be looking at medication or techniques like yoga, meditation. I'm always on about that, helping us be our maximum. So the new moon helps us get fitter and better in all aspects of our lives. And this new moon, being gently trine Jupiter, says really and truly, we need to think about expanding these things rather than narrowing the field. We need to expand. So if we come to Virgo now, then of course, Leo is your preceding sign. So this new moon is taking place in the sign behind yours. And when we look at that in terms of the houses, it's the 12th house. Again, a hugely complex area of the chart, and one that people get very kind of knotted about, because when you think about the 12th house, planets that are moving around the chart on a daily basis in your chart where they're going, a planet that appears in the 12th house has just actually risen. It's left its darkness of below Earth existence and it's risen into the light. So technically, planets in the 12th house should be super strong and super evident. But there's something about that 12th house. There's something about the shadowness, the secretiveness, the subtlety, the nuances of the 12th house that mean it does work. When we've got planets in that area, they work in a kind of enigmatic, sort of smokescreeny way. So this new moon is behind a smokescreen, we might say. And what it can signify is also the world of the unconscious mind. It's our spiritual home, the 12th house. And so we could think about, you know, when we allow the power of the mind to create reality for us, then that new moon is also showing you the power of the mind to do just that, and to also allow the world of dreams to be more important to us. So we pay more attention to our dreams. We think about the meaning of them and if they have any direction for us to follow. And again, rather, as I was saying, to, you know, the 6th house for Pisces, this idea of, you know, practices like meditation, yoga, Pilates, these things that are mind, body, and spirit. When we're in harmony in this way and allowing that full range of experience, we are empowered. So this new moon is empowering Virgo for you. So let's come on to our final group, the cardinal signs, and we're going to start with Libra, because Libra, of course, is the well, it's the sign 3 beyond Leo. So we're in the 3rd house of the solar chart, and if you have Libra rising, then of course this new moon. Do you know, I've got this wrong? It's the wrong way around. Sorry about that. Libra, it's the 11th house. It's 2 signs on from Leo. So the new moon is occurring in the 11th house of the horoscope. And if you have Libra rising, then it is the 11th house. So a new moon in this house is a very kind of idealistic moon. If we think about our lives, when we think about what we do in the 10th house, for instance, the 10th house is about getting places. It's about jobs. It's about our role in life. And so it's our material world, the 10th house. Now, when we get anything in the 11th house, it's not about material factors. We've done and been and got the t-shirt there. What we're now concerned with in the 11th house is something a little bit more idealistic, so that we want something from our efforts. We want something fulfilling and meaningful from our efforts and from our roles in life. Now, of course, it's a humanitarian house, and it's also the area where we collaborate with people. And collaborations can be working collaborations. They can be new enterprises. You can be entrepreneurial in this house as well. So it may be that the new moon is a symbol of a new collaboration, a working collaboration, a social collaboration, any kind of collaboration. Maybe even when we think about good works and charities and movements that are there to help other people, then we think also of a new moon here, meaning it's a great time to join some kind of organization that actively seeks to improve other people's lives. And it may have a connotation to do with places which are experiencing conflict or suffering. So joining an organization, getting involved in a charity, that new moon could very well indicate something you should do there. But it can indicate a new enterprise and a new collaboration as well. The other thing about this area of the chart, and this has a lot to do with the opposite area, the 5th house, is that in the 5th house, it's very personal, and we do things that are personally very creative. Whereas in the 11th house, it's the bigger picture. And if we think of the 5th house as small self stuff, then the 11th house is higher self stuff. Remember, this house is just before the 12th house, our most mystical, spiritual area of the horoscope. So this idea of actively consulting one's higher self for information and conduct, and also constantly saying, what would my higher self advise about this? And of course, when we do that, we're also open to the collective. So this area of the horoscope is also the collective area where we join with like minds and kindred spirits. New moon, new beginnings in all those areas. Now to the 5th house, and we look there and we think of Aries. Aries rising, Leo rules the 5th house. And so the new moon is in the 5th house. If you're an Aries, it's in the 5th house. And the 5th house is that very, very creative area, but it's very personally creative. It's about our inner muse and our inner child. It has a lot to do with being a child in that sense of finding that innocence and that creativity that was so spontaneous when we were little. Then as an adult, we become much more serious about ourselves and we're aware of so much more. We lose the essence of innocence. And it's this essence of innocence, Aries, that's going to be important to you in these next couple of weeks. Remember, a new moon isn't just about the day of the new moon. It'll take you right through the 2-week period till it reaches the full moon. So we're thinking here about new creative projects. Now, this may be something you come up with yourself. You decide, hey, guess what? I'm going to do this. I've got a great idea. I'm going to work on it and bring it into being. But of course, we can be procreative, because what's more creative and to do with the self than bringing out a version of yourself in flesh and bones? So it's about pregnancy. It's about childbirth, but it's also about our offsprings, if we have them. So this new moon may indicate something happening to one of your offspring. There's a new chapter opening for in the life of one of your offspring. And of course, because you're a parent, then that also means a new chapter for you. The new moon is a good time to think of ways in which we can pour our creative juices into things. As I often say when I come to this house, when I do the whole of the zodiac, you know, if we're stuck in life and nothing's kind of working, we've got our energies focused on doing this, that, and the other, and it's not working, often just getting into a creative act really fixes it for us, because we find joy in creation. Let's also think about procreation. That should be a very joyful act that leads to procreation. And so it is with the creative practices that we do. It generates a kind of sense of joy and of finding something that makes us feel fulfilled as well. Again, let's think about that 5th, 11th axis. Didn't I mention the word fulfillment in regard to that 11th house, and of course the new moon in the 11th house? So now we come to Cancer. And for you, Cancer, Leo, of course, is your next door neighbor sign. It's the one you move on to next. So for you, this is the 2nd house of the solar chart. And if you have Cancer rising, then the new moon will be in your 2nd house. So a 2nd house moon, new moon, is all about new beginnings in terms of security, of assets, of self-worth, both in the sense of your value as a person and what you have in the bank and your accumulated assets. So the new moon brings a new dimension here. Could it be a new source of income, a new source of investment? Could it be something that you have now or will come in that makes you feel more stable and secure? Maybe it's the idea really of a home, purchasing your first home, for instance, or even your 10th home. The idea that you've got, you know, money in bricks and mortar, how 2nd house is that, adds to your sense of stability and security. But so too does it matter that we feel our value is noted. And there is a definite tie-up between when our sense of self-value is strong, that we tend to get treated better by other people, and we tend to get better pay. If we're negotiating pay and we're feeling great and good about our self-value, we're going to get a better deal. And it's the same really in any deal, whether you're doing a property deal or you're selling something and buying it, or in something that involves, you know, you negotiating. Then if you have a strong sense of your own value, you'll do better out of that negotiation. And of course, that new moon being trine Jupiter sort of says, you know, think positive, be positive. Be positive about the things that you're investing in. Energy investment, financial investment, because you'll get more out of it the more positive energy you flow through it. So yes, on the mundane level, new source of income, new ways of dealing with money. And if you've got a money problem, then that new moon is going to be a considerable help, whether something comes along and makes a big and positive difference, or you figure out a strategy and a way of making it work a lot better. So last but not least, Capricorn, then we've got this new moon in the 8th house. If you're a sun Capricorn, or of course, if you've got Capricorn rising, or you know you've got Capricorn ruling that 8th house, then that's where the new moon is. And a new moon here, in a very similar way, has something to do with finance and worth, but different. Because if in the 2nd house, we earn our own money, we handle our own money, it's uniquely connected with who we are. In the 8th house, it's all about relationships. So it's the financial relationships you have with organizations and other people. And there's also a tie-up here in as much as how full of value we feel ourselves, as indicated by our 2nd house transits and positions. In the 8th house, this is all about how other people, how we interact with other people, how we receive from other people. The 8th house is a reception, how we receive. And, you know, sometimes it's very hard to receive. We're better at giving than we are receiving. But if we look at this in the area of intimacy as well, we need to be open to receive. And I think if we think of the new moon helping us to perhaps do things in a way where we're more open to other people, we're more open to new investments, we're open to new financial agreements, we're open to new ways of working around our monetary situation with other people, we're going to make real gains from that. And of course, a new moon all by itself might just produce something. It might be the start of a new intimate relationship or a new stage of intimacy for an existing relationship. And it can also be, of course, income that you weren't expecting, whether that's a bonus of some description, whether it's an inheritance, or whether it's a settlement. So here we have the new moon either spontaneously delivering its good Jupiter news, or it's you getting behind it and thinking, how can I make this work for me now I've got all this knowledge about where things are? So there we go. That's my run through the 12 signs of the zodiac. But of course, now it's time for my conclusion. The times that the part of the video where I've thought about the things that have happened to me since the last time I was here, the things that sort of make me think, you know, that's sort of interesting. This is relevant to people, and I take up that kind of point. And so this time, this video was interesting. I have a client, a very lovely client, who is involved or is a mentor, a life coach, and works in order to help people transform their lives. And her situation at the moment is that she's not making enough progress. She loves what she does, but she's almost beginning to feel maybe it's not right for me. If I can't make it work as I want to make it work, perhaps it's wrong for me. Now, this isn't the first time I've heard this story. It happened earlier in the year to another one of my clients who works a lot in a similar area, not quite the same, but has been able to really have the things that he imagined and wanted to appear in his life appear with absolute regularity. And that sense that the mind and the will, the cosmos, everything is aligned somehow to bring about what you seek. Suddenly, for no reason, wasn't working anymore. This position that he was after, not available, people not getting back to him, and a sense suddenly as he was, affected by this and wondered quite what was going wrong with him and life and his perspectives. And before that time, yet another person involved in this world of really helping people live their lives and perform at the top of their game, be the best in themselves, change their lives for the better, worldwide reputation. Suddenly everything was drying up. Clients, venues that he would work from, drying up. And he described this to me as though a faucet had been turned off, a tap. It was dry, nothing was happening. So this does happen. And it made me think about everyone else out there for whom there's a similar thing happening, in that for the most part, your strategies have been great and they've, served you well. And the things that you've gone for in life have usually been attainable and reachable. And suddenly that isn't applicable anymore. It's like you've descended into some kind of time warp where nothing's really happening. And of course, it's particularly evident if you've done these manifestation programs, which really do teach you or help you manifest what you want in life. And it's a strong thing. Before all these manifestation programs, there were spiritual books about the same thing, about having the belief and the vision that would bring your life to you in the way that you wanted it to. But it's not a magic bullet. And at certain points in your development and, however you're using it, you will come to a crisis or a point where it's no longer functioning. Now, I'm going to give you an analogy here, a metaphor. It's a little bit like a canal system. If you've ever been on a canal, you know that periodically there are locks. And that means because they're on two different levels, the canal itself is on two different levels, and you can't just, get there. You have to go to a lock and let the water rise up to the next level, or the water go down to reach the next level, whatever way around it is. And that's what's happening if you are a manifester and you are someone who believes and has tremendous success, not only in your own life of manifesting what you want, but also helping other people manifest. When it no longer works or something seems to be blocking you, see it as this situation of a canal moving on forward, but you need to change your level. And it takes time. It takes an indeterminate amount of time. For some, it may be quite quick, maybe 2 or 3 months. For others, it's a great deal longer. But in that time, you are changing. And only when you're ready to go to the next level, which will be even better, will you find what appears to be blocking you, what appears to be not happening, easing up again and flowing forward. I mean, when we manifest, whether we want to manifest a relationship, whether we want to manifest a great job, whether we want to manifest great good health, well, what happens is we lose that job, we don't get that job, our partnership turns pear-shaped, we can't suddenly find anyone we can hook up with, and the manifesting of perfect health seems somehow to have gone completely wrong if we develop something like cancer. But let's take that analogy of manifesting great good health and well-being, and you get something like cancer. It's that journey dealing with the cancer, whether it's the treatment itself or whether it's the psycho-spiritual aspect of dealing with cancer that's actually part of that lock water change that you then rise to that next level. So never think that your manifestation program has failed you. It hasn't failed. It's that you reach a junction where things must change in order to get to the next level. I think that's a very positive way of looking at it, and maybe for some of you out there, that's really, really helpful. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to being here again in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.